Hi, I'm Sandra from the Adidas archive team, and today we're here with Complex and to see what's in the back. Here in the back, our archive is located in the headquarters of Adidas. At the moment, we're containing around about 40,000 catalog products in here. And we also have a special climate in here. We have 18 degrees, 55% of humidity, which is around about, I would say, 67 Fahrenheit, because we don't want this to happen over here. That is a process that happens to a lot of products, especially when they use EVAs, PUs, and glue. They react with each other. That's why we have this stable climate in here to, of course, slow that process down. That is a walking shoe from 1952. That's a Super Grip from the 70s, which was bronzed afterwards.
Is that like wrestling?
No, that is windsurfing. Mid-80s rock climbing. This is one of the first basketball shoes that were ever made. That is 1946. We're going way, way, way back in time. This is one of the oldest shoes we have in the archive. In 1925, roundabout, this shoe was made, which is a track and field spike, completely handmade. So that is part of the costumes that were made for Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, working together with the Marvel Studios. There was, of course, a collection that was released inspired by the movie, but those were the costumes. And what you see here on this table is, of course, a selection of iconic soccer boots from the beginning of the brand. I'm starting with this beauty because from timing-wise, that's one of the earliest ones. That's a soccer boot from 1950. Or how it was back in the days called a special football boot for icy and snowy pitches, later becoming the Samba. And what you also see is one of our first company logos. You see Adidas with the higher Ds and a track and field spike in the middle. Those higher Ds come from the pose of the high jump. That's why there was always a track and field spike in between. And you find that old logo, of course, on new products as well. Here we go. Most of you know this version of the Samba, which was a later version of it, because the old Samba, of course, was then developed into a low-top leather football soccer shoe, with, of course, also being used for indoors. But if you look to the sole, you still see that there are those three iconic holes still there, because you can play that shoe for indoor soccer, or you can also still play it outside on icy and snowy pitch. That's why it still has those three holes. Pivot point for turning, and of course low top for being played indoors. This is one of the most iconic shoes we have in the archive. It's also used for soccer. That made the big breakthrough of the brand in 1954 when the German national team won the World Cup for the first time. And that is, if you compare it to nowadays soccer boot, that is a modern soccer boot. It's low top, it's already very light, it has a different type of leather, and we also call this the miracle of Bern in Germany, when Germany won the World Cup for the first time, because we were the complete underdogs for the whole tournament, and we had to face in the final the Hungarian team, which was at that time the best team in the world. We somehow made it to the final, and then we had to face the best team again. The good thing was, the day before and on the same day, it was pouring down rain. And I can show you a shoe that is the same model that the Hungarians had to wear in 1954. And you can imagine that that boot is way heavier than this one. This is in dry conditions twice as heavy as the German boot. Also, in addition, when you look to the stud versions, those studs are leather, those studs are already plastic. So as I said, it was raining. Those studs soak up even more water throughout the whole game. We were behind at the halftime break, and in the break, Adidas also could change the length of the studs. So those are screw-in studs, which we used on that boot. And with longer studs, the pitch was very muddy. Of course, they had better grip. So in the end, the German national team won 3-2 because of the technical advantage of this modern football boot. We're jumping in time a little bit. This is the Predator from 1994. You see with those high rubber fins, the idea was that the ball sticks longer to the shoe, so you have more grip, more swerve, and more energy with the ball. And it was launched in 1994, so this year in 2024, we're celebrating 30 years of the Predator. And you see, of course, later iterations of the Predator. That's the 2006 version. You see, of course, how the idea was then used into becoming kind of rubber islands, because you can imagine the first Predator was still quite heavy with a lot of rubber on it. That's why, of course, the idea was then moved into having rubber islands on top of the shoe. So this is the version of the Predator from 2006, in this case worn and customized for David Beckham. So on this table you see, of course, a selection of our basketball history. We start, of course, in the 50s. One of the oldest basketball shoes we have. That shoe is 1949, and you see, of course, high top leather basketball shoe. Also, sole is kind of interesting because it's a very, very stiff one. And if you compare that, it's also quite heavy basketball boot. Next one would be, of course, low top leather basketball boot with the Superstar. I prefer this time to just show the high tops here on that table. Then we have, of course, going into the 70s, the top 10. Also a high top, but you see already how soles, for example, changed. And also, of course, that wonderful stitch line here on the side of that high top basketball shoe. The tongues also changed over the times. So it's a very, very soft tongue. And then, of course, not to forget the Jabbar high and low versions were available in the 70s. And then when we go into the 80s, one of the most iconic basketball shoes, the Pharrell, with a lot of different ideas that we're used to. One of the most iconic features is, of course, this crisscross here. That was invented for the 1984 Olympic Games already, and was then launched, the Pharrell in total, in 1985. You'll still see at that time the patent was still pending. That's something that nowadays on the shoes is not available anymore, because the patent is not pending anymore. 40,000 products in here, which of course contains, you see, wonderful soccer balls stored in a special trunk. So we're very lucky because we have the real played ones. This is the oldest soccer ball in the archive from 1970. And you see, that is also the archetype of a football or a soccer ball. Because if you ask a kid how to draw a soccer ball, that's what they do. The first synthetic one used at the World Cup was the 1986 Azteca, Mexico. In 1998, something iconic changed, the color. Coming from black and white to a complete colored one. That's the 1998 Tricolore ball. And in 2006, we changed from stitching into thermal bonding. And we have, of course, 2010, Joe Bologna, final game. 2014, the Brazuca, and that's the recent one from the last World Cup. So what you see here is, of course, we have a selection of shoes that were customized for Lionel Messi. Chameleon F50 from 2010, part of our F50 franchise, completely customized. That is Nemesis that was worn by him, also fully customized for him and worn at the last season before he moved from Spain to France. Last World Cup, 2022, completely customized for him and signed by him. The new F50 again from this year's Copa America, also fully customized for him, but not game one. So that's when we started to produce soccer jerseys. That was the first one that was available in 1974 in the catalog. It was called the World Cup dress at that time, and that was, of course, made for all the teams. So whenever you have like a sports club that wanted to have a soccer jersey for their teams, that was the version that was available on sale for everyone in 1974. One of the most iconic designs from the early 90s. What you also see, of course, when you look at the history of soccer jerseys, you also see how like shaping changed, material changed. The first one was still cotton. Now we, of course, have also nylon, polyester. So, of course, you see development also in material and shaping from being very thin to being like those oversized looks in the 90s. Also, you later see also different types of colors here with like polo or not polo. So you can do a complete history just about jerseys. So as you were asking for this one, this is of course a mini Stan Smith. There was a mini museums collection we did in the 2010s. But going back to our founder, because back in the days, this was to train the skills also of the shoemakers, to do the big shoes in little as well. Back in the days, they were also used as autograph cards. Then I would start chronologically with, of course, the Gazelle, which was made, first of all, in 1966 as a multi-purpose training shoe. In the beginning, there were just 2 colorways available, red for indoor training, blue for outdoor training, clear color concept. And then, of course, you see later iterations of the Gazelle down here. In the 70s, the Gazelle got, of course, the iconic sole that it still has nowadays. This hexagon sole, that is a version from the 90s. And then of course we have, that is a special indoor version in the 80s. You see of course with the iconic sole, and that was then later of course used as a direct bring back for the collaboration. And then we have our first Superstar when it was launched in 1970, which is this one. And the idea was of course to do a low-top leather basketball shoe, because most of the players wearing canvas shoes in the 60s and 70s, and there always were problems with injuries in the ankle part as well as in the toe area. That's why the first leather low-top basketball shoe was the Super Grip, starting in the mid-60s. Still not covering, of course, the issue with the toe protection. That was then added on the Superstar with the shell toe, the iconic one here. Classical herringbone sole. And also you see the first Superstar of 1970 still had canvas stripes, because that was the material most of the athletes were used to. The later iterations of the Superstar, of course, that is the 2001 series of the Superstar, the Superstar Swarovski Crystal, made for the opening of the first original store in Berlin. And next year we're already celebrating 55 years of the Superstar. Also made in France, the first Stan Smith from 1973. First of all, already made in the mid-60s for a French tennis player. After the French tennis player retired, Horst Dassler was looking for a new ambassador for the shoe. Stan Smith, world class #1 at that time, and was then sold from 73 onwards. The Stan Smith was the most sold sneaker of Adidas in 1989 with 22 million pairs sold. Complex names the Stan Smith as being the greatest sneaker of all time. This is the version from 1973 of the Stan Smith when it was renamed as the Stan Smith, and I totally agree, this is one of our absolute classical sneakers. And then we have, of course, for example, also here our Ultra Boost in 2015. When it was first launched, it was of course with the Boost technology, kind of a new idea of a torsion system, so not comparable to the other one, but still used in the classical colorway with the prime knit upper. And then you see here in the front 2 shoes to compare. That's the first NMD that was launched in 2015. With the prime knit upper, Boost and the other materials, but that you see here, that's one of the inspiration shoes. So the Micro Pace, or the Fire, and the Rising Star and the Boston, they were used as inspiration for the NMDs, because you see those parts, you have that on the NMD as well.